Hello.
Good
Hello,
morning.
hello. Welcome in everybody to Ready, Set, Action. Today, you're joining Christina Whitmer and myself, Deborah Horowitz, along with our special guest, Judd Jones, as we present ideas on the topic of how AI is impacting SEO. As you know, each week we pick a topic and we break it down into three actionable tidbits of information that we hope you can take away to drive business growth. So today we're going to discuss the hows and the whys of the impact that AI is having, what we need to know. And so stay tuned and thank you for joining us. Jed, as always, it's a pleasure to have you join
It's
the
an
group.
honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And for those of you that do not know Jed Jones, he is a go-to expert on Ready Set Action for all things that are related to data and analytics and SEO. He has his own organization, Jlytics, and so we're very pleased to have him join. So, Christina, before we get started, was there anything that you'd like to add before Judd just takes over and rolls with it?
No, I'm sure I'll have some questions as we go, but I'm looking forward to this bit of education for myself. So,
Yeah, I'm super excited. Was geeking out a little bit earlier this week about this topic. Um, SEO has been something that we've always had to be mindful of, but I heard this phrase that it's no longer search engine optimization, it's search everywhere optimization.
I like that.
And I thought that was very impactful and really brings home the fact that there's more options than just being a slave to Google, right?
Hmm. So true.
So, Jen, I know you've got some like a sequence of how you want to lay this out for us so that we kind of all understand where we were, where we are, and where we're going.
Mhm.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Deborah and Christina. Okay, great. So, like Deborah said, I think it's important to understand or think about. First of all, we're marketers and content creators and people who care about all these things, not only as individuals but also as people who do what we do for a living. So, I think what's great is we have an opportunity collectively to actually not only ride this wave as things are changing, but also to help form where things go and help guide that. So in order to do that, I think it's important to go back to understanding our history a little bit, as Deborah mentioned. So let's talk about search and kind of because that gets us in the right headspace for SEO and then moving on to LLMs. So very, very brief history of search. So again, this will be super, super truncated and high level. But basically what we found is in the mid 1990s, right around the time that the World Wide Web became a thing, different companies and actually mostly researchers at universities came up with ideas for how do you make sense of all that content? Because as you started getting actual web pages, exchanged by HTTP over the World Wide Web, someone had to figure out how do you actually find the ones you're looking for, which today we take for granted because of tools that we have available to us. But it was not an easy problem back then, especially as you started getting more and more pages. So you had, Yahoo and Lycos in the mid 90s. Then you had, of course, Google was introduced up at Stanford in 1998. And today, and so I'm going to focus on Google because it's the big gorilla in the room. But of course, there are many other search options as well. And Google does have a huge kind of foothold on the market. With currently in 2024, Google has 87% of searches. So all traditional searches. I'm talking about within the search engine realm, not including things like people searching on large language models. 87% is with Google. And that has provided a huge engine of growth. And this is really important to think about because, follow the money, right? Google's revenue last year, just for its Google Ads, which is its kind of main revenue driver, was $237 billion last year. probably a little higher this year. And that makes up the majority of Google's overall revenue is ad revenue. So why are we talking about ads if this is an SEO talk? Well, because what SEO is the driver that makes people create content, that makes people compete to make better content. That content, along with Google's ability to find the right content for the right person, is what drives their whole ad mechanism. So it's all related. So even though paid ads and SEO were totally different things in terms of Google's world, they very much SEO drives all of this because of the need for people to create the right content to get better searches. So the impacts of search, briefly, what did Google bring to the table? And I'm using, again, Google as a placeholder for all these companies. Number one, it allowed people to find things they were looking for, pretty obvious, in better ways than kind of prioritizing that knowledge. It also caused webmasters, content creators, and marketers to compete for that number one position. And that's really, really important. So anyone who's done SEO before knows that you want to be at the top of search. So that's created an entire cottage industry around people, SEO people, and others trying to get you to number one. It affects webmasters, content creators, and marketers. And of course, that also created even more of an incentive to get more content online. People thought, gosh, this is now a marketplace for my ideas. And I can get, if I do things right and I make good content, I'll get to the top of this search engine, which is like this very steep mountain. At the very top is where you want to be, at the top of Mount Everest, so to speak. There's only a very small spot up there at the top, and that's where you want to be. So all of this competition, it cannot be overstated how important that competitive element is for people to create better content, which of course search rewards that. You kind of get this virtuous cycle of better content gets to the top, more people create new content. So that's kind of how it's been working for a while now. One other thing I'll mention on this kind of the brief history of search, the promise for marketers has been, hey, if you build great content, they will, and a great user experience, people will come and visit your website. That's been kind of the implied promise. Of course, like I said, it's a huge revenue driver for Google. And just briefly, what does search really do for you? Well, it offers quick information. It offers things like definitions, like what is this, what is that? It gives you news, it provides links, and it can return thousands or even millions of pages. That's important when we get talking about that versus large language models and AI. It's keyword based. Generally, it's search term based. Now, it used to be just specific keywords would bring up specific pages. Now it's more of a semantic, it can be a keyword that means something that's not necessarily on the page but has a similar meaning. It's gotten more sophisticated, but it's essentially keyword based on the words that you type in and the search terms. And also it can return images and text as well as videos and lots of other things. So that is the brief history of search, and kind of brought us to the introduction of large language models. So I'll pause there for any commentary or questions.
I would like to you might jump into it later, but just if you have any additional comments later on or now about snippets and voice search, right? Just generally, because I do find that snippets are like, it doesn't give you the result that you want in a way. Like you go for a snippet, but the truth is nobody's ever going to click. So how do you understand the value? So I'll just add those two for maybe future.
Yeah, that's great. So that's a great question, Christina. So those are, tools or things that people who create the search experience have added to create additional bits of information for you, for us. I think that's all going to continue to evolve. Different people use snippets to a different degree. But all those types of sort of additional results that come up are there for a reason. The ones that are clicked on and used tend to persist. Google is always trying new things. Mm-hmm. They come up with new rollouts. They just had a core update in May of 2024, but they'll continue to roll updates out. And every time they do, they introduce certain functionality, both in terms of how you search, how it generates results, which websites get more priority in terms of that search experience, and what type of information comes out of it. So, and voice search is something I use quite a bit as well. So yeah. Questions or comments? Anything else on traditional?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Should we move on to the next section?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's talk about the introduction of large language models. And again, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, LLMs and AI has kind of been used interchangeably. It's too deep of a topic to get into the subtle differences, but essentially, large language models are a flavor of AI. They're one way of doing AI, which is to take a huge, they call it corpus or a body of work. Usually it's millions or billions of web pages that are publicly available. And then using these sort of training techniques, they crawl the pages and they create a huge neural network. And that's kind of as deep as I'll get in the technology part. But essentially what it does is they have to train that model and then they can then go use the model. So I'll give you a little bit more example on that. So OpenAI is the one that kind of got a lot of attention early on. Its first one was the ChatGPT 3.5, which came out in November of 2022. Another popular one is Anthropic's Claude AI. ChatGPT has come out with more versions since then, including versions that allow you to process text, images, audio, and video. So it's becoming more sophisticated. These large language models, or LLMs, are much more, and I'm sure almost everyone on this call has tried using them or maybe uses them every day. They're more conversational in nature. They're more interactive. But it's really important to note that they're trained every so often. So they're not trained every day. So if something just happened yesterday in the news, it's probably not going to show up in your LLM results because it just happened yesterday. The model was not trained on that data. So how often are they trained? It depends on the model. Every several months, sometimes every year. It depends on what the model is. That will probably change over time. They'll probably get faster at training more recent data. But that's essentially the difference. The resultant impact has been huge. And so because of people just using these, whether it just kind of be for fun to try it out, or whether it be to actually use it in your job as a tool, people are using it quite a bit. And I'm saying it, ChatGPT, Claude, several other ones. There's the user kind of versions that people might just use on their desktop or laptop, but all of these companies also offer APIs or background methods for getting that data into apps and things. So companies are building tons of products that actually are using ChatGPT or these other large language models and pulling that data in. So it's important to understand that difference. So the basic user experience for those of you who may not have used them is essentially you type in some words or phrases, they call it a prompt, and you'll get some sort of return on that. And you can specify the style you want, how many words do you want? Do you want it informal or formal? I mean, there's a whole field called prompt engineering, which is all about how do you best put the prompt in to get what you want out of it. So there is some sort of expert knowledge required in order to understand the best way to ask it a question. So it's kind of like the quality of your question will absolutely affect the result. Contrast that to search, where you just type in some keywords or maybe a sentence or a phrase. You don't have to be quite as specific as far as how you word it or how you want that data back. Google is just going to return those links and those pages that you're looking for. So what was the impact in the world on this? So first of all, of the large language models. So first of all, Google sat up and took notice, and in mid-May or so, they rolled something out. Well, they rolled out Search Generated Experience, SGE, which basically is a little summary at the top of the page. They rolled it out in limited form, and now currently it's on every result that I see, or at least most results. Mm-hmm. There are some types of searches where it's not returned. And there are companies out there who monitor stats on this. So let's call it 75%. It's gonna vary depending on the search and the day and as this evolves. But a large percentage of the search queries that you type into Google today are going to show you a summary at the top. Now, this is a huge deal if you're an SEO or a marketer. Because why is that? Because if users are able to get the content that they need at the top of the page, there's no incentive to scroll down further to look at the actual web page. That's an impact that very specifically and directly impacts, like I said, anyone who runs a website, anyone who wants content and eyeballs coming to their website. So that's a huge impact. So Google and other search engines have taken notice. You've got Bing has rolled out an image generator. Google has image generators now. And those are getting more and more sophisticated as well. You can specify not only words coming back, but also pictures. And that's going to all continue, of course, to get better and better as we go. So what are some advantages of large language models? So if I'm a person, let's say I'm a business person, since we're talking about marketing, but it could also be a consumer. If you're talking about a B2C situation, I'm looking for knowledge. I'm looking for information. What's the advantage of going to a large language model as opposed to search? So here's some advantages as it stands today, and this is going to evolve, and we'll talk about that. But today, you tend to get a little bit deeper dive. You can get writing help, so it'll actually write something for you. And we all heard about college students having essays written for them instead of writing themselves. But that can also go to marketers who are having content created for them, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. It can help you just be creative. Hey, give me some ideas for X, Y, Z, and it will give you the ideas. It's pretty amazing. It's very customized to your search. Like I said, it can compose articles and posts and even presentations. It can compose code. So as a data scientist, I write Python code, and I'm able to write code faster now with AI because I can structure a query and it can help me write it, and I can go test it, and then I can go back if it has an issue and kind of get better. But it's actually writes code. It's pretty amazing. It's more conversational and interactive. It also does a great job of summarizing things. So if you need to summarize in fewer or more words, it's going to do a great job of bringing that back to you. Contrast all that with just a result of, up till last year on Google, where it's just a bunch of web pages that come up with little descriptions on each one. Very, very different experience. What are some downsides to large language models, especially in relationship to search, but also just in general? Downsides are what they call hallucination, which is a real term that they use, and people who tune these models can actually change a parameter for how much you're allowing it to hallucinate. So if you're talking about maybe creating something, creative writing or something, you might want it to hallucinate more. It's going to make things up that maybe don't exist. You can also turn that temperature down to have it hallucinate very little, but you can't really completely eliminate hallucination. It's always going to sometimes. We're currently at the state of the world in terms of LLMs where it's going to create some information that's not true, that's just not real. So that is a challenge when you're looking for factual information, to say, gosh, it told me something that, Berlin is in France, or something like that. It's not it's going to give you the wrong answer. Not very often, but it does happen. It also does not return links. Now I'm going to talk about this in a minute too, because that's evolving and changing. But with Google or other search engines, you can actually go through and kind of click on different websites and look at and go deeper into these different areas because you're actually getting links returned to you. Large language models typically, again, this is changing and evolving, but right now they typically just give you text back. They also don't give you context or source citations or give you citations of where did this information come from. And that's also going to lead into our third section in a second about that lack of citation. And they're a little bit less exploratory in nature. So whatever you, some good points by Lori there. Absolutely. So whatever you're looking for on Google, you're going to have that. It's kind of, you're an investigator, you're an adventurer. You're going to go through these pages and kind of poke around and find, much like going into a cool antique shop and looking around, you can see what's there. LLMs tend to package it for you, and it's all packaged, and there it is. And again, that can be fun, can be great, can be convenient, or it can be not so good. And this briefly, before we go into the third section, is downsides for marketers. I think this could hurt content creation in the long term, even in the midterm, because if you think about it, if you just kind of repeat in your head and think forward in the future about what we're seeing now, imagine the extreme case where everyone starts creating their content using AI, and people are not making original content because if they're, and I'm kind of talking about the worst case scenario, this could happen. I think we're going to find ways to avoid this, but the worst case scenario would be that everyone is relying on AI, so it's recycled already based on other content. And then there's really not much incentive to create new content for humans because that's actually human generated. Because if search engines aren't going to give people our websites the actual citation or reference, hey, this is where that came from, there's very little incentive for someone to create new content because it's going to. So of course, kind of the worst case, dystopian scenario would be that we end up with this huge recycling mart of content that doesn't really have a lot of new ideas. Obviously, we're going to collectively find ways around that, but that's kind of where it's the tempted to go. It could kind of go in that direction because you have less searches. Fewer searches are resulting in people going to web pages listed on a Google because either they're using large language models, they're doing less searches overall, or they're using Google, but they're just relying on that little summary at the top more. So you have less people going. That could really hurt organic traffic, and it ultimately down the road it could hurt user experience because of the reason I gave earlier. People don't have incentives to build that content. So that's an impact. So I'll pause there.
I have a question, Jed, based on what you just said, because I have thought about that too, is what happens when we get to this place where everything is just recycled.
Yeah.
And I've always found AI to be reluctant to ever say that it's wrong or it doesn't know things. So do you think that will eventually improve where you say, what don't we know about something? Or I don't know. I mean,
that's a great question. That's a great question. Well, if we asked it, what don't we know, it would probably try to find sources where people talk about what we don't know, and you would use that.
Right.
It is, at the end of the day, this is one of the biggest misconceptions, and I've been working with neural networks for 15 years or longer, not building large language models but I know how they work under the hood, and they don't have any knowledge, they don't have actual intelligence. What they have is abilities to synthesize things that are already there. Now, obviously, it's going to appear more and more like they have intelligence. So people who are concerned with, oh my gosh, the computers are taking over, there will be a day in our lifetimes probably when it's going to seem like they're sentient, because it's going to be so sophisticated. But at the end of the day, it's not really sentient. It's just really, really, really good at seeming like it is. And so there is going to be that question of how do you get new knowledge in? How do you fact check knowledge that's being presented to you? How do you get true creativity in this way because of that lack of connection to the real world other than what it's reading from what other people have already said?
Yeah.
Other comments or thoughts on that?
To your point, I think it is, it's totally evolving. It feels like on a day-to-day basis, it feels like it's coming at us faster, and it just keeps kind of changing, and it's a bumpy ride right now for us in marketing to try to understand what we can leverage. And then I almost feel like I feel like a stronger urge to develop more content, just because of what you were saying before. Is that instead of regurgitating the same content, shouldn't we be also looking at how do we continue to influence what it is that they are returning in those results?
Yeah, I agree. It's fascinating. And I agree. It's that pace of change is going to increase. I do think, though, for marketers and just general population who's concerned about all this, is the best way to not be concerned is just become familiar with these tools.
Absolutely.
It takes away that fear factor of, oh my gosh, because they are just tools, and you can use them. And like I said, most of us probably already have, but incorporate them into your daily life, and hopefully you use it as a way to enhance what you're doing. Much like getting into a car today, I can go a lot further, a lot faster, but I'm still driving that car,
Yeah. And I'm curious to know, do you feel like the LLMs get into a rut in terms of the information that they're returning in the results? And if there's a way for us as users or as marketers to kind of help to leverage visibility through those LLMs. And is that a topic for your final section, or a topic for another day?
Yeah, that's a deep question. Let me go through what I've kind of thought about for this, and then I think I'll touch upon that a little bit. But that is an excellent question, and it's a deep question for sure. So let me briefly go in our last few minutes here and where I think things are going, the road ahead. So I did, Christina and I were talking the other day about Perplexity, which is a tool that's come out. There's another one called Search GPT. And these are based on, in the background, they have OpenAI's data coming in to them as far as how they're working or how they work. But You can poke around in Perplexity. It's kind of a little bit of a hybrid between a search engine and an AI type LLM model, like using Claude or ChatGPT. It does show images, it shows links, so it's a little more exploratory. I think that's a good example of where things are going. I think all of these tools, like Deborah has mentioned, these are moving so fast. They're going to converge on each other. They're going to change. They're going to evolve. They're trying to always stay one step ahead of each other, which is a good, healthy competition for the rest of us. But I think you're going to have less of that line between search and large language models is going to blur very quickly, even within the next 6 to 12 months. I think, into next year for sure. I did find some studies on people who had kind of tested Google search versus Perplexity, and they kind of did a Venn diagram on what they're each good at. And what I found this particular study said is that what they're both good at is recalling a fact, like, oh, what was the year this movie came out or whatever. That can be done in both. Google tended to do better on more exploratory searches, like we talked about, more meandering. Let me check this out. Let me be a detective and look at that. It also can bring specific resources. So if you want a certain video or other kind of document, it's going to bring that back to you, to your computer. You could download it, etc. Perplexity and other LLMs kind of win more on things like how-to guides. How do I do this? Which I know a lot of people, I use YouTube a lot for doing how-to. How do I change the fog lamp on my car or whatever? It can give you lots of videos. Perplexity is good at how-to. It's also good at summarizing things. So instead of just giving you a bunch of links, it actually summarizes them well, a little bit better than Google currently does. So that's going to what I just said probably will be different in 3 months or 6 months, but that kind of gives you an idea of where it is today. What I think is going to evolve, I'll leave us with a couple parting thoughts on where I think things are going to go. Like I said, they're going to continue to converge on each other. I think we're going to see tools that bring the best of both worlds to users. And there will be new functionality that we can't even think of right now that are going to be introduced, I'm sure. And I think there's also going to be better methods for determining whether the model is hallucinating. There needs to be controls in place, almost like AI looking at AI, saying, hey, is this hallucinating? Let's do some fact checking here, like we were talking about earlier, to see if this is actually hallucinating or what are the chances that this is hallucinating. So kind of like a governance, I guess, of sorts. And then integrating private data. So you can what's called fine tune a model. You can actually train any of these large models that exist, but feed in your own data, not just a prompt, but actually train it on build an actual neural network model. And so if you have your company data, for example, let's say last year's results or what have you, or recent data, it can be trained into that model. You could ask it questions. Hey, what were my sales last quarter? It can tell you that answer based on yours. It's not publicly available. Your data does not get fed out into the world. It stays in your little ecosystem. But you can actually train it on your data, which is pretty cool. And so let me just finish up in a minute or two here, because I know we're getting close to time. Marketers. What about marketers and the impact? So I think the biggest challenge is in the area of content creation. Will marketers and other companies and companies in general, and anyone who owns a website, feel the incentive to create new content when large language models just kind of use it for free, ingest it, summarize it, but doesn't cite it? Obviously, that's going to have to change. SEOs have to compete currently today harder for those organic results because, like I said, people aren't always going down past that initial summary at the top. Search will have to differentiate between AI-generated content and human content. So there'll need to be something in there where it's like, hey, did this person, use their time and resources in their brain to create something, or was it all just AI? Because if everyone's doing AI, like I mentioned earlier, and just building a bunch of content ad infinitum, you're going to end up with a bunch of kind of recycled content. That's what we have to avoid and work against or work around. And how will the web function with fewer searches? Will there be incentive for people to have a website to put content online if it's just going to be fewer searches happening in the world? So I think the HTML websites will become less widely used. I think we're going to have more alternatives and options for all of this, which is a point that you both made earlier. But as long as I think human beings are playing a role in thought leadership, in guidance and strategy, whether it be in marketing or other areas of the world, technology will be designed to search, summarize, and deliver that knowledge. So that's where I think we're going to be headed.
Awesome.
Wow. That's fantastic. And I think it is good for us to take a step back and just look at where we've been and, where we're going. And right now, it seems to me like we've got to keep on the same types of strategies in terms of more long tail keyword SEO, to try to help us maximize how we're being returned in the search results, right?
Completely agree, because that all is still happening, and I agree to your point, Deborah. It's not like, oh gosh, let's just stop everything we're doing and change it all. No, it's not like that. We still need to keep building the content and helping people find the content for our customers and for our own companies and agencies. So that's absolutely going to, yeah, don't change that. But it will evolve as to how we go about that, how we create it, and how we prepare our content so it can be found by others, for sure.
Awesome.
Excellent. Christina, any final thoughts?
Nope. I'm sure we'll table some stuff and try to get Jed back here in a month or something and dive deeper into some stuff. So.
That'd be a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
We love your knowledge, and we're so appreciative of you taking a moment to share it with us and with our audience. So that's a wrap for us today. Thank you to the audience for joining us. And remember, it's every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. So we can just, have some coffee together, have good conversation, and share some tips. So we hope that this was good information for everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.